Hey, aloha, hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Embers Rising, the podcast where we ignite the spark within, fuel our passions, and elevate our journey towards personal and professional fulfillment. I'm your host, Wendy J, and I'm truly excited and delighted that you are here with me today. I'm super fired up to share with you my first guest on the Embers Rising podcast, so I'm going to dive in right now. And today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to a person who has touched my heart and soul in so many profound ways. Our journey together began as a co-working dynamic. And little did I know that this encounter would lead to a connection that really has transcended the entire journey out of the ordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you an extraordinary, rebellious entrepreneur, dedicated advocate of lifelong commitments, and a marketing and branding warrior. His authenticity shines through every interaction, and his golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, is the guiding principle that fuels his impactful journey. Please join me in welcoming this incredible soul who's my best friend, business partner, and twin flame, David Tucker. Hey, welcome.
Hey, aloha, babe. Am I allowed to say that on camera? Probably.
Hey, you're my first guest on this episode. So excited to have you here.
Like, I'm excited to be the first guest, although I think I had a little bit of an advantage here when it came to all the other candidates that could be first guest. We're going to have to end the day together eating dinner. And if I wasn't the first guest, I'd be like, what's going on here?
Well, I really thought about this introduction between us because I thought, we probably should tell the story of how we met. And I should just, narrow down the intro here to bring you in so that we can just share with everyone how, where we've gone in this whole story and this episode, because in this episode, we're going to go over the top 5 strategies in couples working together and how we have found this incredible balance. But there's a lot of things that we want to share in that. But I thought, first of all, before we dive into those strategies, we could just talk a little bit about how we met.
Yeah, it's just such a natural thing, right? When we hang out with other couples, when we meet people, one of the first things is like, how did you guys meet? And so people always ask us this question, and I like to just be straightforward and honest with them. And I like to tell people that you picked me up online.
Well, kind of, not exactly, but yes, a little bit, yes. I was living in Hawaii at the time. Gosh, I had a couple of clients in my agency, and I don't even know where you want to start with this, but literally I was working for Russell Brunson at the time. And I reached out to someone in our inner circle who I needed an SEO expert, and reached out to my friend Mason Tanner out there, and he gave me the number to you.
Yeah, and shout out to Mason Tanner for doing the right thing. He immediately called me and said there's this girl from Hawaii that has a large project with a vacation rental company and had a few hundred vacation rentals on the island of Maui, and she needs SEO. And that's the way most of our business has always been generated. So I said, cool, and didn't think anything of it, except the phone rang 1 minute later, and there was Wendy J on the other line, because it was my first introduction to follow through from you, right? When you say you do something, you're going to do something, it happens, and it happens quick.
Yeah, for sure. And we end up building this 4-year relationship over the phone, sharing client work. Really, it was a long 4 years, it seemed like, but it also went really quickly. And I didn't know anything about you. So fast track this story. Literally, we were both headed to a conference in San Francisco together. And we kind of started having those conversations before we jumped on the plane of, where you're going to stay, where you're going to go to dinner.
What sessions are you going to go to? Hey, do you think you want to get married? Right? The basic questions that you ask when you meet someone for the first time.
Basic questions. Yeah. And I think I knew in those 10 days leading up to that event and that travel that, yeah, I believe that you're on my soulmate. And that was literally just through the voice and the energy coming through that phone call, those phone calls that we had. It was
right, because you would never send me a picture. And I didn't start asking for that until years down the road. But I'm a search expert. So if there's something online, I can uncover it, right? I can find it. And there was just nothing. It was like crickets. So you become a little bit suspicious, what's going on here? So you did finally send me a picture. Boy, it was a shocker.
Yeah, it was me on a bike riding up to Haleakala on Maui.
Right. So here she sends me a picture. She's got helmet, glasses, this cycling kit. it's sort of a pulled back picture. I'm trying to zoom in on it, and I'm like, well, it's not a boy. She's definitely in shape, but other than that, like, there was no telling what was coming next. So it was a shock when I arrived in San Francisco and saw you standing there in that miniskirt and that white top. Like, I still melt and lose my voice. So I'm like, oh, but fortunately I was able to recover.
No, it was awesome. And the journey really started there. And I just think, knowing where we've come from and putting these strategies together for everyone has really helped us understand who we are together and what we can really build and support each other. And it seems like every wave we go through, our journey continues to get stronger and stronger as a couple working together. And that's really what I'm excited to share about in this episode, like how we've navigated and really built a lot of framework to have a successful personal relationship, but also the dynamic of working together as a couple.
Yeah, it's just interesting because you had your own company. I had my own company. I had a partner. I guess you inherited me as a partner by default, right? But that's the way it started. And we just sort of cross-pollinated the clients, right? Because we each have our own dynamic in terms of skills and what we can do. But you build trust in that space, right? When you work with someone long-term, you find out a lot about them. And, it just came to the point where working together was our day-to-day, right? That was our daily driver.
And I think a lot of couples today are either considering working together or are working together, are struggling because it's really hard to go into a relationship and then you're both working together and not understand some frameworks that could help you be successful in that. And if you don't have these really set up, and we kind of naturally started working towards them and learned from a lot of mentors and coaches, which we'll talk about, of how we set this up to be more successful. And then we just kept applying that. But if you're even not in a relationship, if you're even considering like something that may be down the road for you, this is a great episode still to listen to, because we're going to give the strategies of couples working together and how successful you can be when you're entering that space.
And we've worked with a lot of couples, power couples that
Yes.
own businesses, right? Like, personally, I've worked with a few hundred businesses in my, can I say, like, over 20 years of digital marketing back in the days when there wasn't all this competition in AI. And one thing I noticed, right, and it's a metric that very few people talk about, and that is the businesses that I worked with that had couples driving their business forward were always more successful. And, it's this math, right? When you have a job, you sort of like check out. It's 9 to 5, and you check in at 9, you check out at 5, and that's it. But when you're a couple working together, you have, 24/7, this work-life integration. And so the math of this is like, I call it times 2 equals 400%, because the amount of output that you can create as a couple together is so much more. I also sort of like to call it 2 hearts, 1 fortune, right? And it just seems to be true.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, diving into these strategies, if you don't have the framework, it can really take you down and separate, and you can also feel just not happy about even moving through the business that you're creating, and a lot of friction then in your personal relationship. So let's dive into these, because I'm really excited to get going. And I just want to start off with number 1. Is that all right if we dive in, Dave?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay. So number 1, I want to start off with understanding the dynamics, really understanding the dynamics of 2 of you working together and where the challenges are going to arise, and how to kind of, I guess, really make that split between personal and business life, and what the benefits are when you have dynamics like Dave was just talking about, and then what the challenges are. And we definitely have advantages now and continue, because we are so growth driven and we are life bookers. We dive into everything that we can on how to be more resilient and build our skill set in and as a couple, and continue that molds our framework. And I think one of the biggest ones we learned was over this last year, a process called PCM. And I think, Dave, maybe you want to talk a bit about PCM, because this actually gave us another lead of advantage of working together.
For sure. So, we've always had coaches in our life. And in this last year, we were lucky enough to work with Brendan Kane and the Hook Point team in a project. And one of the amazing things that we were able to do in that process is called PCM. It's the process communication model. And really what it does is it defines and pinpoints what your communication style is, both input and output, and how the different levels of working together, communicating together occur, not only from the good times, but also in your stress responses, right? And if you know that about each other, what you end up doing is being way more compassionate and aware, and it just elevates the communication, above where we traditionally are, right? We just all assume that communication just happens. But if it doesn't happen with intention, a lot of times you can find yourself out left field. And so, yeah, PCM is something that we have heavily adopted in our process.
And I was just going to say, PCM could be a whole nother episode, and we probably will do a whole nother episode on this because it's such a deep dive, but we're not talking about a personality test or the human design test. We're actually talking about a communication model. But when you know your partner's communication model, it really helps you be more effective and efficient in the way that you are sharing with them, so you know what the response is. So if I know what type of communication David needs to hear, and then he knows what I need to hear, it really helps us make a more efficient space in the way we talk through business and then also on our personal side.
Yeah, I'll just say my base personality is the rebel, right? And then there's a lot of things that stem down from there. Wendy, your personality type is?
Yeah, harmonizer.
Right. Hence all of the nice, soft, fluffy pillows everywhere.
But, again, I think we should do an episode on it because it's so powerful, but just putting it out there, when you know each other's, communication model, it is important. But, this number one, what we're talking about is understanding the dynamics, and everyone lives through different lenses. We each see our story through different lenses. How we go about doing our narrative in our brains and what comes out of our mouth is our own narrative. So it's important that you understand how your partner is thinking and how they see the world through the lens, and then you as well, and taking the time to understand that.
And it's an interesting point, right? We can just sort of move on because everybody sees the world differently. And even when you're a couple, everybody jokes like couples as they go through life, they even start to look and sound and act like each other a little bit. But we're all looking at something different when it comes to the way we process things and our narrative, our past. And so literally like 10 people can sit down on a couch and watch the exact same movie at the same time, and everybody comes away with a different story, right? You may all laugh at the same joke at the same time, but you're laughing really for a different reason. And so understanding and having the love and compassion, say like, we might be different and we might disagree, but that's who we are, I think is super important.
And I feel like we should share a little story here, because when we didn't have this in our life, there was a little more friction because the consciousness of what each other's needs were was not being met. So maybe I was approaching David in a space that was really frustrating for him, but then maybe he was also approaching me in a space that I was not willing to take that. And now that we know each other's communication model and know each other, how we're seeing each other through that story lens, that really helps me understand that, okay, this is how you like to play and that's just you. And this is how I like to play in life and that's just me. I know that we've had in the past talking together in business or in our personal share time, we did our best to get through it, but this brought us up a massive, huge another level. It was a huge step for us to understand this between each other.
Yeah. So working on it, it's a never ending thing, right? It's not like you end up at a certain goal and a certain finish line and say, we're done building the relationship. Because we all sort of fall backwards in different periods of time into some old ways, some negative thinking, whatever it is, right? And that's the advantage of having a partner that loves you, that also understands how to maybe help draw you out of that if that's what you need, or maybe just sit in the mud together, right? And both be down at the same time for the same thing and support each other.
So I think, in this first one, just know that there are benefits and challenges in understanding the dynamics between each other. And we're just using PCM as like the next level up. But if you still don't have PCM, it's okay. really just try to understand that each other has each other's needs and how they'd like to be communicated. It's just important to talk about. And if you don't communicate it, then your partner doesn't know what you're thinking and they don't know how to communicate. And that continues just to build friction and frustration for you. So you have to like take some time out and say, okay, how would you like me to communicate in our business relationship so I know what works for you, and vice versa?
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, when it comes to couples working together in business, you have such a huge advantage because you just have more horsepower, right? You have the ability to do more, focus your energy like a laser, the task, the goal, the mission, whatever it is, and get it done together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it just happens quicker. But we also, I guess I just want to also say, I call what we do work-life integration because there is no work-life separation, right? Until we create a framework and say, hey, after 6, or when we're at dinner, we don't talk about work, right? That's one of the things that you need to define. Here's where we need us and not the business, because it can consume you. It can roll over you.
And I was just gonna say, not only can it consume you, if you're working on a project together and you're a couple and it's causing more friction and it's separating your relationship, you're probably in the wrong project. And you need to get out of that project, whatever it is, or the situation, because it's tearing you apart and it's not the right thing. And I know from experience, Dave and I've had that happen so many times that felt like we were being torn apart. And then as soon as the project was released, then things healed right away. So just take a note to yourself. If you're in that space right now, really look at if it's the project or if it's the two of you. It could be the project's tearing you apart.
That is very, very true. Depending on how you work, right? Like if you're working in what turns out to be a negative environment, and the values and the mission isn't aligned, it can eat you up, right? And we've taken those things on just for the money. And I think we've learned our lesson, right? Us is more important than the dollar, even though it's tempting, right? You have to really think about what is most important in your life. And it better be your relationships over money, every day.
So many lessons learned. So let's dive into number 2, and that's shared values and goals. I really want to talk about emphasizing the importance of aligning your values together and setting mutual goals to establish clear direction for your joint venture together. That is so important. And I really want to start off with storyboarding, because creating vision boards it sounds crazy and old school, but we have done it so many times and we've done it in so many different ways. Do you want to share a little bit about that, David?
Right. Well, that was a Wendy thing, right? I wasn't a vision board person. I always sort of thought of that as like the woo-woo way to do things. I would write down my goals, but I wasn't into like clipping out pictures of things and putting them up on a board, because I thought that's what storyboarding was all about. As it turns out, envisioning where you want to go together in a storyboard, you start to look at things like, oh, I didn't know you wanted that, right? Like, or you'll say, oh, we both want a pool, those sorts of things. Whatever it is you want out of your life, emotionally, spiritually, monetarily, physical assets, those sorts of things. You're never going to get them if you're not in alignment, if you're always going one direction and the love of your life is going another direction and you never discussed it, right? And that's how divorce happens, because the two people that thought they loved each other, and they probably do, just never discussed which direction they were headed.
And I think like the vision board is really great for your personal life. Then there's also a vision board for the work-life joint venture together. And a way to fast track that, because all of you are like, I don't have time. I have kids. I have family. There's no way I'm going to be sitting cutting out magazine pictures. Totally get that. There's a couple of ways you can fast track it. One, we have literally sat on the floor with 3x5 note cards or sticky notes and like wrote out the projects and where's the goal we're going. Did a screenshot, boom, printed it out. That's our vision board. I mean, that's how you can do it too. Like if you really want to fast track this for just like, hey, just for work projects, it doesn't have to be elaborate, doesn't have to be amazing and beautiful. It just has to be a vision together that you know where you're going. Or if you're not a visual person, you can just write it down and build your, Google Doc, whatever, or you could do it on a slide, PowerPoint, whatever slide deck you're using. So it doesn't have to be a big elaborate thing. But if you're elaborate and you're like, hey, I actually want to go deeper into this, I have found some really cool stuff out there on Amazon that kind of has everything done for you, where they already have the cards made and you just build it. Dave and I are working on another one, so we'll be sharing that soon here out on our channels for our next vision board, that we constantly are dreaming. We're dreaming of the next thing. So, but it's important. The whole point of this number 2 is having shared values and goals, and tapping into, David, what you like to talk about is the why. Why are you doing this?
Right. When you come together to do something, if you just head off in a direction, going a million miles an hour without first stopping and asking, why are we doing this? Right. And I'm guilty of this all the time. Like, I just go charging off forward into doing something without sitting down and thinking about the why. But once you can sort of crystallize that, you've got a much stronger bond together as to, the direction you're heading. And it really, ties directly into the what, right? What do you want the outcome to be? Those two things are connected together. And before you move forward, you've got to really figure that out for your shared values and goals.
For sure. And I think, when we talked about tactical things like creating the vision board, creating your goals on a list, visually creating it, it's really important that you know the why, what you want the outcome to be of the project, and you also continue to talk about it. You cannot be successful if you don't communicate constantly about where we're at in the project or the situation or the service. So David and I have set up a regular base scheduled weekly meetings, not only for like our personal life, but also weekly for business. Sometimes it's twice a week, and sometimes it might be for you every day. But I think scheduling regular meetings is so important to make sure you're on the same page. Your efforts with each other are not being wasted, and you're not going, someone's not going in this direction, someone's not going in this direction. You're actually moving together at the same space.
And it was super strange when we implemented this, right? Mm-hmm. And you said, let's schedule a meeting. I'm like, but we work like in the same house, 2 different offices right next door to each other. Just drop in when you need something, and that never works. So we now have a scheduling framework that we use, and that is to sit down on every Sunday, and we make sure that we're scheduled out for everything we need for the next, sometimes 4 weeks, right? And that the work that we're doing is plugged into that, and that our meetings together are scheduled so that someone's not waiting around for another person and imagining what could be. So scheduling those meetings is super important.
So again, the important thing about shared values and goals is to map out together the goal and direction of where you're going. So however you're going to do it, we're just giving you some strategies here to align your values and pop a clear direction of where you're headed, so that the venture that you're on together is successful for whatever project or service that you're engaging in.
Yeah, and ultimately that helps you get on the same page so that you're not wasting your time and your efforts, because that's the most precious commodity, right? We all have a limited amount of time. So if you want to be effective, exponentially, like, you got to be on the same page, got to be on the same team. And I see so many couples that this is a sticking point, right? They didn't communicate. They don't know where they're going. They don't have the shared values and goals. All they think about is, we need to make more money. And at the end of the day, they, are pulling apart instead of working together in the same direction. And it causes friction. And believe me, nothing can cause more friction in a relationship than, probably kids, money, and working together. And working together may be at the top, right? So you need to have a plan for those things. When the time comes, you can fall back on it and say, babe, let's slow down here. Let's go back to our original goals and our original plan. Are we on the same path?
Yep, absolutely. All right.
And Wendy usually is. I'm usually not, right? I'm the one that sees so many bright and shiny objects out there, and she'd be like, well, what are you doing?
I don't know. I seem to make my fair share of mistakes, but let's move on to number 3, because this really is getting into defining roles and responsibilities. So number 3, defining roles and responsibilities encourages the 2 of you to clearly define your strengths, your weaknesses within the business, and how to leverage them together. And that's where we have found things like coaching has made a difference for us, or a community, or someone that mentor that you can talk to help both of you see what you're working on together. Because it does come down, like what David was talking about, the work-life integration. If you know each other on a personal level, then you can definitely move in the strength of the successful, positive joint venture together.
And coaching, let's just touch on that for a second because it's been such an important element in our success and growth together. I had sort of done a little coaching before we met, but I thought it was sort of one of those woo-woo things. And, in our first year together, you said, hey, I booked us an event with Brendan Burchard. And I said, who's Brendan Burchard? And wow, why does he charge so much, right? Well, we found out you got to pay to play. But in that journey, we've discovered that we're always going to have a coach every single either quarter or half a year. We have actually in our schedule what we need to skill up on, how we need to get better. And that's included things like relationship coaches. It's included voice coaches, acting coaches, film coaches, coaches on how to, do YouTube. I mean, the list is endless of skills that you need to have in this space in this day and age. But one of my favorite people was someone that was on Brendan Burchard's keynote. He was on his stage and we just vibed with Anthony Trucks. And look him up online. He's the Awe Shift coach. And we were working on the shift part of our scaling process. And it goes back to the individual strengths and interests that Wendy mentioned. A lot of people think that way, but Anthony said, okay, let's define what you're bad at first. He has an interesting take on things that you don't want to do, you don't like to do, or things that you're bad at. Do you want to share that, Wendy?
What you don't like to do or what you're bad at?
Yeah, exactly. Not me personally. Let's not attack me because I'm bad at a lot of things. But no. So Anthony really said if you're bad at something and your partner's good at it, like it's time to shift the roles and responsibilities so that you can execute and move forward quickly. If you're both bad at something or something needs to be done, do it first, right? What's that mean?
Do it first thing in the morning. Dave and I have a rule about doing the thing that we don't want to do first thing in the morning, whether it's making that phone call to that client, whether it's getting out, on our personal life, getting a workout in, whatever it is, or a project that's delaying you, or David's favorite, all of the 50 things that take him like 5 minutes. Don't procrastinate and get them done before noon. It's a big thing. And honestly, we learned this key too from Marissa Peer. How a lot of celebrities work in the space is actually doing the first thing that they don't want to do first thing in the morning to get it out of the way. It's a part of being a high performer, and a high performer habit is getting that first thing that you don't want to do done and out of the way. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just getting it done so you're not procrastinating on it.
Yeah, follow through and procrastination in relationship and in business is detrimental because it's going to cause, sticking points and friction. And I'm, a really good example on this. Not that I'm bad at follow through or a core procrastinator, but it's the little things, right? It's those things that are only going to take me 5 minutes to do. And I'm like, well, it's only going to take me 5 minutes, so I don't need to do it now. So I put it as a task on my calendar and they start to stack up and stack up and stack up. And pretty soon I have this, list of 5-minute things that need to be done. That's going to take me a whole day to actually accomplish them because you've got to plug and unplug, your mind into each one of those things. So yeah, it's been a good tool for me to, have Wendy remind me because she's a warrior when it comes to doing the thing that needs to be done that nobody wants to do first thing in the morning.
So going back to, defining these roles and responsibilities, I think it's important to look at assessing what your business needs, what you guys need now, especially for projects that you're working on or services that you want to provide, making sure that you have open, honest communication. You really have to be on the same page about the project that you're going to take on, that it feels, good to you, and then decide on this responsibility fairly, because there's going to be skill sets both of you have, and one may be stronger than the other, or like David and I, we may have strengths exactly together, but they're still a little bit different, and decide who's going to work on that and be kind enough to let that other person grow into areas that they might need to grow in, either on the personal growth side or on that skill set side for your workflow. But it is important to stay on that fair, as much as you can, fair side. And it doesn't happen all the time, because there's always there's title changes and I'm this and you're that, and for Dave and I never feel like, and I always feel like we're equal here. We don't put titles on each other. It's just like we get in the work and we just go for it and do it.
Yeah, sometimes we've added titles in front of our names in businesses more for other people to understand what our role is than to feel good about yourself, right? I always like to say, I like to go with what works and not what sounds good. So the less sometimes you have to communicate to people, they're like, oh, he's CMO, he's marketing, right? Or she's COO, right? She knows operations. I use that example because those are our strengths. But at the end of the day, you need to assess your business needs and what is going to serve you, the project, and the client. And hopefully, you move through that to the point where it's not you and your partner doing everything. You have some who's, right, that are plugged into the process that you can, offboard some of those projects. And hopefully those who's are better than you at doing whatever it is the thing is that needs to be done. That's part of growing a business, right? Two people is a startup. A business doesn't really blossom until you have people, under your tutelage that are working for you, working with you.
Yes. And just to kind of wrap up this section on number 3, roles and responsibilities, it's just really important to recognize and appreciate each other. It's one of the things that really, I think, goes missed a lot when you can have your partner come and say, hey, I saw the work that you did on this and I really appreciate it. And I know it just seems like guys have a harder time actually saying those words. And I know, the ladies are like, hey, I saw what he did. I'm going to go say that appreciation level and recognize it. But it is important to recognize it. It does build your confidence together and puts you in a space of feeling that you can do this again tomorrow and continue scaling. And then when I talk about accessing mentors and coaches, they're everywhere. So choose someone that vibrates with you, even if it's a group coaching session. Whatever you can do for the both of you to skill up in the way that you need to, wherever that is, so that you can help make your work-life balance successful. And Dave and we literally have had coaches ever since. And there's been times we couldn't afford coaches. And right now we're with 3 different types of coaches. So,
Right.
Strategy coach and, business coach and life coach. So, it just depends, but definitely it does not harm the two of you to go find a coach, even if it's a low scale, like, hey, I don't have much of a budget, but go in and try it, give it a try and let us know. I'd love to hear your comments about that.
Yeah. And shout out to our current coach, Kevin Diamond. He is a TikTok coach, right? And you think, why do you need a TikTok coach? But the truth of every, business tool out there is a strategy that you can learn that will exponentially help you be better in whatever it is. And so why waste the time trying to figure it out yourself when someone's already done that for you and they can plug you directly into like A, B, C, D, here's what you need to do.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Diving into boundaries. I think this is number 4. It's so important to discuss the boundaries together to maintain a healthy relationship between the work and personal life that you are doing to prevent burnout and maintain the balance of your partnership together. And I know, David, you have a story that I think you wanted to share here, and I also have, and this boundaries is like physical boundaries and then emotional boundaries, mindset boundaries. There's a lot of boundaries we're talking about when we're discussing the balance of partnership.
And this is where Wendy and I think we just think differently, right? This is the dynamic, because part of the way I look at boundaries, I think most people in life have overreacted to boundaries. And sometimes I like to call a little bit of bullshit on that, right? Because a lot of people set up boundaries to prevent them from feeling something they don't want to feel, when in fact you need to go through that. And even though it's uncomfortable, the friction is where the growth is, right? There isn't often easy growth. I really like Tom Bilyeu's take on it. He calls it bright lines, which is either, all in, hell yes, or hell no, right? We're not going to be doing this thing. But we have failed in this area in some engagements with clients. And one of them I want to just talk about is we got lured into working with these people that own this chain of hotels and accommodations. And we were doing work for them and they said, we want you to, grow inside our business. And so they flew us over. We looked at all their properties. They fed us a great dinner, ate some steaks, some red wine. They said, here's the money. And we looked at the money and said, this sounds good, even though we both had seen the red flags already. Like, these people are over control freaks. And it ended poorly, right? Because the second we took the money, we got the call, that Monday, like, do this now, do this now, do this now, do this now, right? And it was outside of our boundaries. In fact, it was outside of my hell yes, I'm all in. And it unraveled pretty quickly. It was interesting that they were a couple. I would have to say they're a power couple. They just had way different values and boundaries and goals and what they want to do. So I call those people users. Yeah, not good. So
I think it's important when you're taking on services or clients to just maintain those boundaries and be really strict about it. Some of the ways that we do it in a physical form is having dedicated workspaces. I have a dedicated workspace. Dave's got a dedicated workspace. And sometimes it's not a separate room. We've had shared, like there could be a shared wall, but we had our own dedicated workspace. We've definitely shared like a corner before, like he had one side of the corner and I had the other side of the corner. But it's important to have that workspace just so that you can set yourself up for success and you're not sitting on the bed or the kitchen table. Those are also dedicated places for your rituals, and that dedicated workspace defines this is the space that I need to put my mindset in to be here to get the job done.
Yeah.
So
When my butt is in this chair, I am focused on work, right? And it's funny, our first place together was so small, right? So our office and the kitchen and the laundry room and the living room and the dining room were all in the same room, right? There was only one other room. Well, that there was the bathroom and the bedroom. And I will say, don't ever take your work in the bedroom. There's only two things that go on in the bedroom. One of them sleeping. Sorry, I had to say that. So don't take your work into the bedroom, but define that space. And when you're in that space, you're working. When you're out of it, maybe you're out of work mode.
Yeah, for sure. That is boundary that has to be set up. We also design a lot of rituals that transition us from work life to personal life. And it can be simple rituals like we're both done, go for a walk, head to the pool, go get some nature, hike in nature, go work out, go out to dinner. I mean, design something that like hit up meditation, design something where it's a transition. Because if you don't have that transition, then the work conversation goes into the personal conversation, which just can create a lot of friction. And you don't need work conversation 100% of the time, 24/7. You just don't need it. You let that be like you shut the door on it. So that is something that we work on. And also, for our personal life, we do schedule couples time. I think it's important. The whole date night thing, that is a real thing. You've got to have it. We've realized when we've gone through some of our relationship together and we didn't have date nights and we didn't like take this time out, even if it's like, hey, we're going to go to lunch, babe. Great. Like those are important, nurturing times because that's when you get to have these deeper conversations together, these meaningful conversations together. That's now about personal life, not work life.
And we see this in other couples where things go wrong. And that is the business takes over and they start to look at each other, more as business partners than lovers, right? They look at their time together away from work as almost roommates, those sorts of things, right? And all of a sudden you wake up one day, you've got a thriving business and you both want out of it because you don't like your business partner, right? So, I think that's just,
and I want to say,
keenly aware of that time.
Yes. And I want to say boundaries is so important. I feel like it's almost one of the most important strategies here when we're talking about couples working together, because you've got to help each other recognize red flags for burnout and also complete opposite, create self-care. And they have to kind of happen intertwinedly. So it's important to really hey, are we on the same page? Are we at this burnout space? And what do we need to do about it if you get there, but try to avoid it because you've set the strategies up for yourself for success? But we totally get it. We've been there so many times. At the other part of this is making sure you have self-care rituals set up for yourself. And
right. Especially in some projects, you're going to achieve burnout because it's such an incredible sprint. So there needs to be a release valve on the other side of that, because sometimes it's just what's necessary. So,
and for me, for self-care, I love exercise to get it out of my system. I love meditating. I love yoga. I love getting a massage, Reiki, acupuncture, walking in nature. What's your self-care, David? What do you love?
Yeah, I love all of those things. I make sure that, I clear my morning Monday through Friday and make sure I get a workout in. First thing, that's sort of what, lights me up, gets my energy moving, gets my mind moving. I also like to spend a little time just meditating. And I'm not great at it, but I need to really just sit down and first thing be creative in the things I want to accomplish because I'm a morning person in terms of my creativity, right? Like by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I've done so many tasks that I'm just sapped. So recognizing that is super important.
And a lot of these things sound so easy. And if you're sitting there listening to this and you're like, yeah, that sounds great, guys, I can't even get myself to even do one thing. There are some techniques that I've used to help me change your mindset. Because, we also are, it's like we're so hardwired, right? And if we're not updating our software to actually make the growth steps, then we're not really getting anywhere and we're staying stuck. So play with different concepts that can help you. I've tried EFT. I've done the tapping solutions. There's great apps, by the way. Nick Ortner is a fantastic app on I think it's called Tapping Solution. Anyway, fantastic. That can help switch the mindset. Listen to a podcast, read a book on something, find something motivational, inspiration that's going to help you make those mindset shifts, because that kind of pulls right into maintaining your boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
And
number 5, unless you have anything else to add to that, Dave.
no, I was just going to say, and we probably covered it, but recognize burnout in your partner and yourself, right? But sometimes your partner is burnout and you see it and you need to just like say, it's okay to move away from today, whatever needs to be done, take some self-care time. And I'll pick up the slack, whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, and that could be a whole episode on its own, because I did talk about that a few minutes ago about burnout. But you're right; it could be it could be a daily burnout. It could also be a massive project that you've been working on for months. That could be a burnout too. So it's good to recognize when you need to take a pause.
People around us, they often say, do you guys ever argue? So let's move on to conflict resolution and communication, which is number 5.
Number 5, conflict resolution and communication. This is where I want to offer you tips about creating effective communication, conflict resolution, how we do it, and really promote active listening and addressing issues constructively with each other out of and with respect and empathy, because that is so important to have. This kind of framework in communication really helps us not have bitter feelings. And also, I like to say, how many things can you shove underneath the rug that you're just holding back and that you've not said to your partner? And that happens a lot when we didn't have frameworks like this. And over the years, and would you agree, we've gotten better and better at communicating? There's less things shoved underneath the rug. We're more open and honest in our communication style.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's difficult to hear because your ego gets in the way, right? But you need to sort of have a framework for moving through that. And for us, usually conflicts and communication come when people have different ideas. And in business, you always have decisions that need to be, worked through. I really like the framework that we've adopted. And for most things, it's best idea wins, right? And you need to pull back and say, okay, this wasn't my idea, but I'm not attached to my idea. I'm attached to the idea that is in alignment with our goals and our values and what we said we wanted to accomplish. And we're both very good, I think, at stepping back and saying, oh, I hadn't seen it that way, and that actually will work better. And inevitably, when I explain that to people, they're like, well, what if you both think you're right, right? That's the core of most arguments. And I like to just use Tom Bilyeu's framework in so much as the tiebreaker is which idea is going to get the outcome quicker. And so whatever idea is more aligned with the outcome and is going to be the speediest thing, that's really the tiebreaker. And then if we can't get past that, sometimes you just have to sleep on it and you have a whole different perspective, the next day. And then ultimately Wendy gets to win.
That's not true. Not all the time. Definitely not all the time.
No,
But it's
I
definitely
know.
gotten better. I think coming to an agreement on whatever you are deciding on, taking action is better than inaction. However, it's all about timing and choosing the right timing for whatever your action you're going to take, and letting your ego go aside when you feel like I've got to do this thing, or you're both are gonna, we have to make this decision right now. Sometimes you don't really have to make the decision right the second. You can like sleep on it. Nobody's pushing you, forcing you. So that's something that we've learned in our conflict communication style, as
Yeah,
also
grandma used to say, all of our grandmas used to say, never go to bed angry.
yeah,
And I love grandma, but you're wrong.
yeah,
Sometimes you just got to go to bed angry
yeah.
and zip it, right? Not say the thing that's inflammatory in the moment that you're going to regret and is going to get you farther away from your relationship and your goals. And it just seems every time you wake up in the morning, you have a little bit better perspective. Things have simmered down. So sometimes you just got to shut up.
We do have a rule about that. We have tried not to have heavy conversations after dinner. It just is, there's just no room for it. It gets you riled up. Or if there's an incoming call that's going to rile you up, don't take it. That can wait till tomorrow. And I don't know why I say rile up, but it's just like fires you up, and you don't need that before you set yourself up for success for sleeping. It's not a high performance habit. You really need to be in a good, calm space. You've had a nice dinner, enjoy each other with your family, your kids, and be in a nice, peaceful space to have yourself a good night's sleep the best you can. And then if there is a conflict, come back to it the next day. So that's okay to do that.
Yeah, control your time, right? We've all seen the call come in, at 7:30 at night, and it's
And you're
from
like,
a client, and you intuitively know, like, is this going to be good news, or is this going to be them offloading whatever it is? And we're in marketing, like there are no real marketing emergencies that require us to, jump in. And we're not customer service people, so sometimes you just let that thing go,
yeah,
wipe
and
it
I want to
away,
talk about,
and yeah, hit it in the morning.
yeah.
Do the thing you don't want to do first thing, and that is call them back.
Yes, Dave and I are repetitive in the way we're saying this because it's so important. So, but I do want to jump into, use this as an opportunity to learn. Sometimes you don't have the skill set, and so each other needs to find this opportunity to learn and make that happen. Whether you go find a video on how to better communicate, you work with a coach, a mentor, read a book, listen to a podcast on better communication, it is important to do it. And as well as practice active listening. It's so like you can be talking and straight up to your partner and they are not listening. Their brain is checked out. It's somewhere else. They're already doing 50 other things behind you. And it's just like, oh, I'm like speaking to a brick wall. I know you've been there. I've been there. Dave, you've been there. But it is important to say, hey,
it's part of humans. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, are you with me? Because we're here. We're here. Are you hearing me? Are you really hearing me? And practice that active listening together. And then another tip that we like to use is use I statements. Like, I want to tell you about this, or I am feeling this, or I like this. When you start using you, like you did this, you should do this, you need to do, that's already on the avoid blame gaming. And we don't want to do that because in our communication, it already makes that person just like, oh, I don't even want to hear you. And you're causing friction at the very beginning. So when you come into a conversation in that business side, even the personal side, really focus on your I statements. I am doing this. I'm feeling this. I have this thing that I would like done. Not you should do this. You need, you have, you are. That just feels so blame game. It doesn't make the other person feel good.
Yeah, and it's also the victim mode, right? So the truth of life is wherever you point the finger is where the power comes from. And so if you want to be empowered to move through it, you point the finger at yourself. You say, I take responsibility, and this is the way I see things. If you're always blaming someone else, you're always pointing, at someone, the you, it just gives them all the power, and you end up feeling rejected and guilty. Does that make sense? Did I make any sense there? Was I rambling?
Yes, no, it does. I want to talk about conflict because when we've had conflict, when one person gets escalated, you're escalating the other person. And then it just builds to explosion where you're probably going to say and do and take action on things that you really probably shouldn't have. And what we've learned that works is when one of us is elevated, for me, I need a break. I need to take a break. And sometimes it can be for 5 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 days. I need a break. And I just have to say, I can't deal with this conversation now. I need peace out. My mental space and emotional space just can only handle so much, and then I'm out. So it's okay to do that as long as the other person knows that. David handles it differently. He's a bit like Tom Bilyeu. He wants to attack it now. Let's get to the solution, check it off the list, and move on. You know, I'm like Lisa. I'm like, no, I need like some space and time to just like peace out, think about what's going on. And it's a learned process because it didn't happen like that for us at all. We've had to go through major blowouts to actually get to this peaceful space of having a conflict.
For sure, for sure. And then just give yourself some grace, know that you're human. Wendy and I our biochemistry is connected, right? And even though I am this, like, let's be positive, let's move forward, even when she is down, it doesn't work. If she is down for any amount of time, right, my biochemistry just feels it and I end up down, right? But I know that about myself. I'm like, all right, here it comes. We're going to go and we're going to sit in the mud together and be down for whatever amount of time it takes. And then we always come back to now what, right? That's the question. Now what do we do? And how do we get out of this and move forward? A lot of times you just have to go through it.
And I want to share like how sometimes we shift the energy of that, because sometimes if family can shift the energy if you have kids at home, but sometimes if you're just a couple and it's just the two of you and you're just escalating an hour ago, you're really ticked off. Sometimes the best thing to do is just both of you get in the car and like go somewhere different. Like don't talk about it. Say, we're not talking about it. We're just going to go to a store, like break the energy with something, like go out for a walk, just do something that's different, that's engaging, something else to help you shift the energy. It is important. And at the same time, when there's things that are escalating in the conflict, have a timeout signal. Like I just like, timeout. I'm like done with this conversation. I cannot go any further. Check back with me tomorrow. And, I have to come back to it. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to choose the right time and space to discuss certain things that trigger you or trigger the other person. And I like to make sure that that's on our schedule, right? If it's that important, if it's worth talking about, it's worth putting on your schedule. And that way, you know what you're going to talk about, when you're going to talk about it. It gives you the ability to say, all right, that's going to get handled at this time and place, so you don't have to think about it. And you also can bring in your A game instead of sparking into the debate, which never works out, right? It always can end in an argument. So you're like, hey, we're going to talk about this thing at this time, and we're both going to be calm about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you don't have to perfect it tomorrow. Just know that these are strategies that are here to help you move through the grace of having a successful joint venture, whatever you're doing together. We support you. We understand the trials and tribulations of working together and having a personal relationship. And in this modern world, we got to be aware of how can we co-create together and have a positive relationship where we can make this work together, because it's such desirable to be in a space where you can have a partner that you're in business with. You just have to have the right frameworks in place to make it work together. So,
and it's ultimately rewarding. If you want to have success, one of the things that has worked for us is working together in life and in business and on everything else. We work out together, right? And so our health is better, relationships better, our spirituality is better, our money situation is like all of the things that you want out of life are enhanced and better when you work together with a partner, and you can get there.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to say, as we wrap up today's episode, I hope this discussion sparks a desire and you're able to take some action in the strategies that we just shared as a co-working relationship in today's modern world. May the soulful connection between you, your partner, someone you love, remind us all of the love and collaboration in the entrepreneurial world that is available to us all if we're heading down this direction. So I hope you can embrace the lessons learned here and remember the golden rule: treat each other with kindness and respect. Let this be your guide to light your path as a couple working together. And thank you for joining us on this remarkable voyage of love and unity with David and I, talking about couples working together and how to be successful in these strategies. Until next time, remember that the journey of two souls working as one beautiful adventure, like David said, is filled with growth, support, and a love that really knows no bounds.
All right. Aloha. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us.
Hey, we want to extend a heartfelt request for your continued support by subscribing to our podcast, following our social media, and sharing our content. You help us reach a wider audience and spread the embers of inspiration far and wide. Remember, our mission is to kindle the flames of resilience, empower individuals to embrace their potential, and build a community that thrives on positivity and growth. So we encourage you to stay connected and engaged together so we can make a profound impact on the lives of each other. I'm your host, Minnie J. Have an amazing day. Aloha.